Hey, David,
Hello.
I'll just see if the others are joining. And so, yeah, so I worked a bit on the comments you left, but we can discuss it in a second. There's two comments on the interface object where I did not understand what you meant, but it would be good if you have some input on that. But we can have a look in a second. Because I want to push this one through probably today.
Are we talking about 233?
Yeah, I think. Give the others a couple more minutes, and then we can have a look at it. It would also be good, David, if you guys have something that you want to have in the spec text, right? Just open a PR. Just like this is the chance, like that the community can specify how we want to have this stuff.
You mean like wording or?
Wording or even features.
Okay.
If you think, okay, this behavior I would like to fix in federation, like this is the chance, like the way I see it, it's the progression of federation.
I mean, I remember you mentioned that it's possible that a new primitive would be introduced to GraphQL to handle this exact thing that interface object is supposed to handle.
Yeah,
It straddles, at the minute it's straddling between interface and object, right? Um, but I don't know, is that like a longer term goal?
yeah, that would be a longer term goal, because getting something in the core spec is a higher bar, um, because it's already out there. So the
Yeah.
process is sometimes
Especially,
years.
especially a new kind of type system member is hard
Yeah,
because that just impacts everything. Like generally, changes to the SDL are easier than to the query API, but whatever we introduce for interface object will most likely affect the query API as well and execution and everything, right? Because it will kind of be an interface and an object, so it can have resolvers, so it will be everywhere. So that's a longer task, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, but in general, like if there's anything, like I mean, you also have a huge experience now in federation, right? If there's anything where you think, okay, this was not well done, or where we think there's a better behavior for this, Like these kinds of things, find an issue or do a pull request would be great. Because this is the chance that we have as a community to take a federation to the next evolution step, and then from there on we can self-develop and add features. Okay, let's get started. Before we start, let me all remind you that we all agree to the GraphQL specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, and the code of conduct. All of these meetings are recorded and published to YouTube, and we are using LLMs for summaries and stuff. I have 2 agenda points. One of them is also a TSC vote and is also brought up to the main working group tonight. That is something we voted a couple of times in this group on, and that is the final name of the specification will be GraphQL Federation specification. And that will be hopefully done tonight. And after that, the working title composite schema specification is gone, and it should be then GraphQL Federation. Any ideas on this, or?
Say A if you're in favor.
This originally comes from Apollo, and we also agreed. The guild agreed with that. At that time, you weren't active in the group, but have a chance to weigh in.
No, my only thought really is that federation. I mean, I also understand like the initiative here is to be backwards compatible with Apollo Federation, right?
Yes.
So there's not too much of an issue there, but the only issue I could think of having with it is that Federation then could mean, Apollo Federation, and then there's different versions there, V1 and then there's V2, and then and then we have this actual specification like for the community, and whether that would potentially cause any confusion. But I think if it's going to be, I mean, if not fully backwards compatible, then it's like, I don't know, 95% fully backwards compatible. Then I guess it's not really an issue. That would be my only point.
Yeah, the idea is that we support what Apollo Federation does, but then extend from there on. And like the way that is, Apollo Federation is developed by Apollo, but GraphQL Federation is developed then from that point on by all of us, right?
Yeah.
And that means we basically take over steering ship of Federation.
I guess like until the point that this initiative is released, like I know I like released is difficult. Like I know Fusion, for example, is already like implemented it and offering this, but like once this is quote unquote done, there could be a point there where, for whatever reason, Apollo, Federation goes off in one direction because it has, things that it needs to implement for its customer base or whatever. And it does that on its own, whilst also, we all want to go to this direction where we're all using the same specification. I understand this. But then you've got Apollo Federation, which is like a branch, is now branched off to what is a federation in the GraphQL community space.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just kind of, these are like hypothetical situations. So basically, I'm saying I'm in favor. So yay, like that's fine.
Yeah.
I just hope it doesn't come to some point where there is confusion for whatever reason, but hopefully not.
Yeah, the idea is that we all put in the specification the things that we can all support it. And like the theoretic, like we shown that you can do that. We support now Apollo Federation and the GraphQL Federation in the same query planner and the same composition. So it's possible. If Apollo goes into a different direction, then it also means that they are breaking their specification, right?
Sure.
Like the only hypothetical that I could see is that Apollo Federation 3 would completely break what they built. And in that case, they would be a different specification.
Yeah. But
Because if they just do additive work, like they're adding a new feature, that's basically fine, as long as they abide to the rules and they are also in this group, so they have an interest to do that.
yeah, I think it's a fine name.
Yeah, and then like I want to update the federation pages of the foundation. Jens, for instance, also mentioned that we put all the vendors in there, that we see also everybody who is implementing federation in any form. And then we get a better messaging also around federation as the core specification. And I think, like from a customer view, this is also a great news because it basically says like the vendors rally behind an open standard that is protected by the foundation. So this is a safe thing to take a bet on, right? That is the main outcome I also hope behind this. Yeah. So we also take this up in the main working group tonight and discuss it there. And then we're gonna vote on this. Can still take a couple of weeks. Depends on when quorum is reached on this. And then we, I think, have a very good messaging from the GraphQL side. Like there's an industry standard behind federation. Like it will still take maybe three more months to get this all, like the whole specification done. And then we also need to vote on the final specification text. But I really want this be done this year. So it would also be good, like that Wundergraph looks at what you guys want to have in the specification, what is missing in the specification from your side, would be good feedback.
Okay.
And we can see that we make this a good thing. And then we can have like yearly iterations on this thing. That means if, like, for instance, everybody's working on entity caching, right, in one form or another. Could be that this is the next feature we want to standardize. Could also be that everybody wants to do their own thing. I'm not saying that we have to standardize this, but we have a way to put then features into the specification and drive this thing. I think that's a great signal to the industry.
Going briefly back to the name, will it officially be GraphQL Federation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
GraphQL Federation with capital F Federation, right?
Yeah. Capital G, capital QL.
Yeah, but also with capital F, right?
Sure.
Uh, yeah, I think that's I see that as a positive. And I also took my time to get there. Right in the beginning, I was like, "Is that the right move?" But I think it's the right move to have this as an industry standard, and then certify the specification, and then at some point also for Gartner, there is a GraphQL Federation standard supported by all vendors, and that's the biggest moment I think we could hope for. Okay, yeah.
No, nothing.
Go ahead. Yeah, if we can still, you can still put in your thoughts.
It's not really pertinent to. It's more of a chili cream question, so I'll ask you later. It's okay.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on. The second one is now more technical. This is more, you could say, marketing. In the end, the specification text is the important thing. So let me quickly go into the spec repository. And there we have the interface objects thingy. I did a commit, but let me go into this. Yeah, there it's. I looked at this comment in Apollo declaring the implementations with the same schema is a composition error. That should be the same for us, right? Implementation and interface cannot be in the same same.
If you have so I'm going to use interface, the entity interface. So the interface in a subgraph that has the key directive, that is then in the subgraph we're talking about. If it's defined in that subgraph with at interface object, so it's acting as an interface object. You are not in Apollo Federation allowed to declare in that same subgraph any of the implementations of that interface explicitly, with the sole caveat unless you define it with a resolvable false.
Okay, and this would mean in the Composite schema case you have to have a lookup there. But I think I worked around one of these things. Then carries the same name as the interface and allows the source schema to contribute fields to the. I think I know what you mean, and that was actually one of the things I thought to allow because it was a big ask. Like I analyzed a bit the issues people had with interface object, and that you can. It's about this case where you can dive into an interface, but it's not resolvable. Like you can reach it through a path, but it's not resolvable in general. And I think this could be proven with satisfiability, right? Like Federation was more strict around this.
So I actually don't know why this is a rule. My experience with interface objects and entity interfaces is that it's all very restrictive, but not necessarily for reasons that are to kind of for safety reasons. I think there's to some extent there had to be some compromises. I don't know whether to get this out quickly or because of the other compromises because like again, like an interface and a type into different subgraphs. Like you could describe this as a little bit. Um, it's interesting, right? Like it's quite against GraphQL as a you can't have a GraphQL schema where you have types of the same name. Entities of the same name that are then two different types. Entity not meaning like a federation
Yeah.
entity. So, there had to be some compromises there. And I actually don't know like what restrictions are, because of like safety behavior, and then what is actually for the purposes of like if you did allow this, it wouldn't work for anybody, like not just whatever restrictions like a certain vendor has or whatever.
So
Yeah.
Like another example is like in I know that Apollo you can only use interface objects if every single one of your subgraphs is a V2 subgraph. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. That isn't, for example, a restriction that you have in Wondergraph, just because we we're not bound
We
to
also
that.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not bound to that, and I'm not sure why that is the case. I just know it is the case, and I have a feeling this might be one of those, and I might be ignorant to this as well. That this where you can't have the implementations alongside the interface. It might be again, it might just be a restriction because of because it's implementing it in another graph. If you then had it in that graph as a type, but then you had the 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 entities alongside it, maybe it would cause errors with like you can't implement a type or an object. I really
well,
don't know.
the thing is that it wouldn't make sense, right? And this is, I think, one of the biggest problems of interface object itself. Like, you cannot. So what you're saying is that in source schema B, there is no way to have I don't know, video, which is also media.
Uh, you mean
You
like
could,
video implements media?
well, you have the problem that you have an interface.
Yeah.
Yeah, you already have used media as a type name. So you will not be able to say that type review implements media because media is an object. So on the same source schema, you can actually not tell the composition or the gateway that you also have a media, an interface implementing a type implementing the interface media, right?
Um, it's kind of like so. This example is kind of it's missing some stuff, right? So it's difficult to comment on what you're saying here.
So give me a schema.
So
Or should I copy? Wait.
yeah, if you
Should I?
if you copy everything up from there to we don't
Yeah,
copy
it's
it.
always.
That's fine. Um, so now imagine in source schema A you have just I don't know video implements media and it's got key fields ID and then that's all it really needs.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what you wouldn't be allowed to do is mention in source schema B, you can't define video with like I'm not talking about the implementation thing. Just you cannot have type video in source schema B unless you make the key unresolvable.
Yeah, that's just weird.
Yeah, and like I say, like I know this is a restriction, but I don't know the reason for this restriction. I just know it is a restriction. And
So
I
this
don't,
is
I
this is
can't
really
really
nice.
think of a reason why there needs to be this restriction.
Yeah. Yeah. I also don't see it.
Um, and another restriction that I know you have with interface objects is that um, you can't define them like the implementations all have to live in wherever they're mentioned, they all have to be there in that graph. So let's say there was video and radio and I don't know.
Hmm.
Let's just say video and radio. Everywhere that you mention media, the interface, you would then have to have those implementations in that graph as well. You can't have an implementation. You can't have like only video in one graph or only radio in one graph. This is another restriction that I know is true. Where that one might be for better reason because of how things like resolving certain things, it might be a proper reason there, but I'm also not 100% sure.
But if
Mhm.
you do this, you run into an evolution problem, right? If you have this restriction, you can no longer, if you, as at the moment you have a graph where you have an interface defined in two subgraphs and implementations of two subgraphs spread out into two subgraphs, you cannot remove or add new types without doing composition of both at the same time. So you actually,
Without fiddling around with inaccessible, yeah.
yeah. So that would essentially put you, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think there could be a reason for this. Like it could be actually something that you like, because you want to force people to talk to each other. Like you also mentioned that you wanted to make keys more strict. So like it could be that you actually want people to talk about that there's a shared type. But yeah, I also don't see it. Like my biggest gripe with interface object is that you essentially use you cannot use media in the subgraph properly. Like that's a huge issue, right? If you reduce both of your, like if you say that, okay, we get rid of the two restrictions that you just said, which are there for whatever reason, we don't know, then it's actually possible that you would say that my graph, which extends the interface, also has a implementation of this interface. But that's not possible because the name is already gone. And it's just
Yeah.
because it's playing with the wrong types, right?
So very, very, very naively speaking, I don't think there's really a problem with having like let's call it jagged implementations across subgraphs. I also don't think there's a problem having in the subgraph where it's an interface object. Of course, as long as it's not then putting implements and then the type that which isn't allowed, but we're not talking about that. Having defining or not defining types in there is also not a problem as far as I can tell. Like very naively speaking, I don't see why those need to be restrictions.
Mhm.
I just know that they are currently restrictions for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
and perhaps but the Apollo guys would have a better understanding or idea why that is. I have a feeling it might just be because of limitations of composition back then when this was implemented. I have a feeling, but I'm not fully sure.
I mean, could very well be there are things like that, right? Where it's where certain things were done just because of implementation reasons at that point in time. I mean, it's they didn't reason through these things because they were building a specification for it. They were building a product,
Yeah.
right? And there you take sometimes shortcuts to get the product out.
Yeah.
One thing that I changed around here also now is, and that came out of the discussion last week, is that I don't know if you remember the implement stuff where you can say, okay, this implements now something here, for instance, where you have an interface object that defines text rate, and then you can say that chair actually implements this field. And then for chair, we redirect the traffic there. There's now also the second behavior, and that is the Apollo behavior I overlooked last time that you brought up, that we can also now use just shareable in these cases, right? Where you say this is actually a shareable instance, and then you can use either of these things. And also you can have implement and shareable combined, where we actually say, okay, you have two implementations that override that are shareable. So now this is full circle. Pascal?
Yeah, it's a bit off topic. So let's finish this discussion first.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, implement was basically
Overrides.
override for a interface object contributed field, right?
Yeah. It's unfortunately overrides is already used for other things. And there's one thing in the spec at the moment. We just consider the old overrides. We have to talk if we want to have progressive overrides in the specification. I don't know. Is Wundergraph implementing progressive overrides?
So I have thoughts on this, but like, shall we wrap this up and then I can talk about that?
Okay.
So one question here. You could technically have override implement shareable, right? It's when you would have the chair defined in two different graphs, and one of them would override, both would implement, and one would override the implement of the other one. Then you would have override implement shareable. Okay.
Yeah, that would technically also, like, you override. I don't know if it makes sense, but overrides just that you redirect the traffic.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just from a. You could technically, if only this case would be the case why you couldn't just use override for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of implement.
Yeah, but also override has arguments that you have to specify. You override from somewhere.
That's true.
And here it's just you basically say implement, and the direction is already clear because you are you have the implementation hierarchy.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. All good.
If you we discussed this and I'm just failing to remember, I think, but if you contribute the field that's being that has the implements directive on it,
yeah.
If you contribute that from multiple interface objects, does it override all of them?
So implements overrides everything in the hierarchy. Like let's say not this one. Where do we have it? There.
Because Pascal, like override is always a single relationship, right?
Yeah. No, it doesn't make sense, especially like the required arguments is the killer there anyway. So like if you have required arguments, then it's we need two implementations.
Yeah, and you could have here like the example that I used was basically you have product, and you have maybe a physical product that implements product. Why is this wrong? No,
it's you have to implement before directive.
Yeah, it's like the but I reinstalled my computer today, so do I have the wrong one? No, it's the official. LSP Graphical Foundation. Strange. I will look this up later.
Well, speaking of which, does it need to be a type or is it still an interface?
This is all types, all interfaces, and then we have here in schema B, let's say we have the types, product, physical product. Okay. So now this here introduces reviews for everything that implements product, right? And here I could actually say implements. So everything that override, like that inherits now physical product, would get this implementation, right? Instead of this implementation. And then you could again go in here. This is a third schema. So schema C. There we have maybe
But you wouldn't have to.
maybe a foo. It doesn't matter. Implements product. So this guy actually would inherit this guy here, right? But the moment I would do this, right, I would get this one. And then I could also say, guys, I'm overriding this with
And
this guy here.
And this could have, I'm trying to write on the screen, I can't. And this one could have, for example, a slightly different type signature.
Yes, you can do the same things that you have. For instance, this could be nullable, maybe, I don't know. And then you can override with the inheritance rules from interfaces.
Yeah, but this is it's just so stupid that it's not an interface, because if it was an interface, it would just work. Like,
what do you mean?
If both of the type definitions that you just marked as interface object would just be interfaces, it would be clear as day how this works.
Why?
Because you wouldn't need the implements there. Because you can just redeclare it with a more. I mean, that's not true.
No, it's not true.
You have to redefine it, but you could already specify it as with a more strict.
The implements basically signals that your intent, because in the subgraph where you do this, right?
Yeah,
you might not know if this is actually an interface or is an interface object, and here you signal the intent that you override.
Yeah, I meant if you like you have to redeclare the field, redeclare the field anyway with the interfaces. You're right.
And here, this is the other case, right? You could also have this. And now the planner is free to choose whichever.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense.
Michael, that's my favorite typo that happens every
year.
Yeah,
yeah. I know. It's yeah, but it's when you type fast.
I mean, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it should have been without the E, but here we are. Maybe that could be something. Maybe that could be something that the spec changes. It has no E.
Oh,
but I don't know. Like, are you like I have no strong opinion either way. The only thing is that like this is very, very close to some. It's very close to. Oh, I know it's not exactly the same, but it's very close to override, right? The override behavior, and we are overriding the behavior from one thing and then moving the responsibility to somewhere else, right? So I don't know, part of me would really like to have that in the name somehow, even if it's like override implementation, for example, which isn't the snappiest or shortest directive in the world. Like I just wonder, like as snappy and short as implements is it clear, or is it like reasonably clear to the user in the STL like what this is doing? Because to me, I'm not sure it is.
Well, if you think about it from how you would write the thing, like you would implement it,
right?
So like
this is very it's already been implemented. We're just saying that actually disregard that implementation. This is the implementation.
Yeah, it's kind of right. Don't we do something like a default implementation that you have in some languages? An interface default implementation, and then you still implement. I'm okay. So part of me was also on this would be so nice if it's override. Because you have this inheritance model in your head, right? From I don't know if it's in Go also like that, but Java and C# have this clear inheritance model.
Go has inferred inheritance, but yeah.
Yeah. But in Java, for instance, you or so in C# you basically say override. But But this is for class inheritance. But this actually is an interface that provides a default implementation for this.
Yeah.
So implement could be a reasonable name.
So like,
yeah, go ahead.
So if you imagine, you don't need to write it down, but imagine in here we've defined types A and B, which implement this interface. So those are our entities that implement physical product, for example. So you can imagine like behind the scenes, under the hood, it's as if there's A and B in this schema, but A and B now also define this reviews field. Like they both define this under the hood, because if you look at the supergraph schema, you will have A and B both defining reviews, right? So they are defining they are implementing this field in that subgraph, right? So there's already an implementation there, but what we're saying is in some other subgraph, like okay, sorry, like let's just pretend this was called A rather than foo. We're saying, okay, I've already implemented reviews in this subgraph because that's where I was like the field was contributed by the interface object. Disregard that implementation. This is the one that I want you to look at and where I want you to resolve it from, etc., etc., etc. Right? So you're overriding what's already been implemented. You're not implementing. It's already been implemented. You're just overriding implement. That's my argument here.
Yeah, and it's a reasonable argument. And I'm admitting to, I came up with my argument of implement.
Yeah.
Because override's blocked.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason I've looked for something that you can reasonably explain with precedents, like in other type systems, that we can use instead. Because like the other chain would be, can we free override and get a new name for override, and like what override does. Because the override is right. It's not correct here, but you have this override. It's from, I think.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah. And that is kind of a complete different semantics that we have behind override.
I mean,
also promise required, right? And
it's a subgraph.
It's not a string, right?
This is a subgraph string, yes.
Yeah, but what's the type of the?
It's just a string.
It's just a string. Okay, because I know we discussed the subgraph.
Yeah, but that's in the supergraph schema. That's in the supergraph schema.
Right. Okay.
I mean, there's a world where, like, if you're creating the rules, there's nothing stopping you from updating the definition of override. Where the from argument is where you're specifying, concrete to concrete. You're overriding your field from one subgraph to another field, and then the absence thereof could potentially be inferred to mean I'm overriding the implementation. I'm not overriding responsibility from a field. For example, if you're creating your own rules, there's nothing to stop you from doing this.
No, it's not. It's just I just don't want to create confusion. And also when we say we want to basically be able to drop in a Apollo federation schema, and it's just a little bit maybe of work. It's a GraphQL federation schema.
But it would be backwards compatible because in Apollo Federation, you cannot define an override directive without the from argument, right? So the absence would not be legal unless you change the definition. And at that point, it would have to be a conscious decision that then has different behavior. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it wouldn't break backwards compatibility.
I mean, technically you could have both. like, I mean, that's one of the thing, right? If you have source schema, if you define the same type in source schema A and B, um, okay, you go now. Then
No, no, I'm
like
just
there could be the case where you want to migrate a field implementation from one to the other graph. Like if there is the case for override, there is also the case that you want to move an implementation.
Sure. And like you could even have it so like you keep the definition the exact same, but there's some special syntax. I don't know, like for example, dollar sign. And when you put a dollar sign and then you put something here, it no longer refers to a subgraph, it refers to an interface.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
example.
but doesn't
the-
work. It doesn't work because like you can override. Like can you copy C the thing from C quickly to A?
yeah, this works, like, right? We have this, and now we put this in, and we say override from C.
Yes. And you remove it here. You remove the overrides here. Now you have two implementations and you move one implementation from one graph to the other graph.
And it becomes worse because like override is used. We haven't specified that yet, but that's the next thing I want to attack here, right? 25% of the requests go here.
Yeah. I mean, for me, ideally, like you leave like I don't think it is the correct decision to shoehorn things into things that already have a responsibility. But the name is nice, right? That's like we all
Yes,
agree the name first. But
I really, I'm also a bit pissed that this name is taken.
yeah, but like on the other end of the spectrum, like how would you like let's pretend override was what implement does. What would you then
If,
name current override?
okay, this is a valid thing we could do, right? We could say, if we find a better name for this, then we could free it for this. But it also kind of forces you to a pre-processing. I mean, there is some pre-processing, right? But like this could be surprising for people that we rename this, and then the override that they learned what it is in a pod of federation is now this other thing, right? Like it could make the upgrade path mentally more challenging for people upgrading. That's why I came up with implements. And I also thought is how often do you will you use implement? There is a case for it, but I expect it to be smaller than override. Anyway, let's maybe leave the implement for now. I'm not saying we settle on it, but think about override for a
Sure.
second in isolation, because maybe we find.
Maybe quickly, or one last question regarding implement object that David probably can interface object that David can answer. From your use cases where you see people using interface object, do they need the type?
Do they need the type? What do you mean?
Do you like on source schema B?
Yeah.
Is it required to know the type when you resolve reviews? Is this ever a case, or is this a common case? Because in the Apollo Federation, you can essentially just do underscore underscore type name, and then you get the type from the gateway, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the biggest reasons that you use interface objects in the first place, like there are two major reasons, right? The first is that you want to kind of blanket contribute to a bunch of different entities.
Yes.
And these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but that's one reason. The second reason is that you don't actually know what type you've got. You get given the type from the gateway, and then you resolve based on what it is there. So you
Yeah,
basically have like a
switch case.
stand-in type uh, uh, to basically be a blanket for a bunch of other different types, and then you switch based on what you get back from the gateway. Those are the
Yeah.
two major categories that it falls under for
So
me.
so my question is, how common is the case that you have a switch case here?
A switch case on reviews,
Yes.
or
On the resolver of reviews.
Um,
why on reviews? That reviews is not a problem here, right?
No, the question is like in Apollo Federation, what you get in the reviews in the resolver in the entity resolver for interface object, you get you can specify requirements, and what you can require is the underscore type name. So in case of Apollo
Ah,
Federation, you can essentially say that you want to know if it's a user or a group when you extend it. Right? There's a feature hidden here because if you extend an interface, you may want to know the concrete implementation. And if you want to know if this is like if we say that 70 or let's say 70% of the implementations actually require the type, then we have to think about this in composite schema because with the lookup you wouldn't get the type, right?
without lookup, you wouldn't get the. Why wouldn't you get the type?
How would you get the underscore? Would you get the type that is implemented now? That implements the
That's the query planner can figure that out. It can wire stuff in to get the type name.
Yeah, but how do we pass this along?
Why
Do
I
we have
would get the type? Like the query planner could
with
force the
is?
type.
Yeah, but with is or what?
No. Oh, what do you mean concretely? Like you could have a requirement here. It's no issue.
We could solve it with a requirement, yes.
It's the same thing like Apollo does it.
Yeah.
You can ask for the type name, and then it will be provided.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Okay,
But you
that might
can.
answer the second question the second weird thing that you had before, David. Because if this is like the common case, then you probably want to have all of the types defined in the same graph as well. So that your switch case is actually bound and not unbounded.
well, in Apollo Federation, it's already bound because you
Exactly.
can't have jagged interfaces, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, jagged implementations.
Yeah, you have to have all implementations on all subgraphs, right?
Yeah, you have them all, or you can't put it in the subgraph essentially. Yeah.
But you wouldn't have them. Okay, yeah, sure. You wouldn't have them on where it's actually needed. So what I said makes zero sense. Because in here, you definitely never have an implementation in Apollo Federation because it's illegal to do so.
Yes.
Well, here you will never have, you're not allowed to have foo also in this contributing
You
if you
can,
don't.
but you have to have it as resolvable false,
Right. Yep. Okay. Okay.
which I also don't know why that makes it allowed. Like it just is.
Okay. That's okay. Resolved.
Okay, so let's go on. We have 5 more minutes. So overrides. Does WonderGraph already support
So
the progressive overrides?
WonderGraph supports progressive overrides, but not through a directive.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is things that are related to what I believe a load balancer should do are not concerns of the schema and should be kept to the gateway itself. Just my hot take. The way that you would do progressive overrides in WonderGraph is that you would define what we call a feature flag, and the feature flag is a bit of a misnomer, but what it essentially is you can override a whole subgraph, and then So let's say you had subgraph A, you could override subgraph A to have just the addition, for example, of one field or the subtraction of one field, or it could be a completely different sub, like whatever you want to do. And in this case, if you wanted to say like I want 25% of my traffic to move to uh, subgraph C type object field, and I want 25% of it to go there, you would basically have it so that you would send a header 25% of the time to fetch from the feature subgraph instead of fetching from the regular subgraph. So you basically override the subgraph to do this.
Okay, what do you do in this? So you support this directive like this, or do you have it just like this? Or what you explained is completely different.
So
Like
so
how-
we support override, but the label is not how you would do a progressive override.
okay. So you would have it declared like this, and then
So
in the gateway, in
so
in
if
the
you
control plane, you have then declared what this means.
if you copy schema B, and then if you could just put like dash V for variant.
Yeah.
And effectively what you would have is you would have two supergraphs. You would have one which is A and B, and then you would have one. Sorry, I've made a mess here. One sec. You would have one which is A and B, and then you would have one that is A and B variant. And essentially, you would send 25% of your traffic to the variant subgraph and 75% to this one, based on when you request this field.
Mm-hmm.
That's currently how we're doing it. I think we are going to support it in the way that it is currently in Apollo Federation, but currently
Yeah,
that
the way that I understood why they did this here is
oh, sorry, this is assuming we had the label there. I forgot to mention.
yeah. The what I understand about the label is that the router essentially, this is kind of a policy, and the router is interpreting the policy, and people can put whatever string here foo in, and then the router can implement what this policy actually means. You can write your own logic on top of that, and then you have for whatever reason an override. Maybe because somebody is calling from Mexico, go to this other subgraph.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would then argue like,
But this is the function, right? This text is interpret. And like I don't like it how it's done, but let's.
for me it's not. For me it's more like we have to be very clear what, or I mean, this can be very implementation specific, of course, what this means. But I generally agree. I don't like to have like this should more be a slider on a dashboard rather than a recomposition. But I understand it's just a string, so maybe
Yeah. Also, what do you do in these cases where you want this real progressiveness? You deploy this thing, and now you want to have like 25, 50,
that's what I mean.
75.
Like you want to have like what you want to do is you want to couple this with Argo rollouts. Like you want to do a rollout and then you want to start moving traffic over. And you can't do a recomposition on these rollouts. That's not how this should work. So like the question is, if it's a label, then should it yeah. It's also not is it a policy? No, it's not I don't know.
Yeah, it's a label. So it's this is a function that the router can interpret. But you could also say this is my foo policy.
Yeah, I would completely never show the example %25.
This is what router can do by default.
Yeah, but I don't like this. I would really like to hear the argumentation of Apollo for this. Like why, like this, they have to have a reason why they do it this way. Like they could look, for me, this is an indication that they look at the composition in very different ways.
Mm.
Because how is this supposed to work in a real rollout scenario?
Yeah.
What I don't like about this implementation, I mean, I think I've talked about this at length before about all the directives. There are a lot of directives that hold all the power rights, like override, inaccessible, to some extent shareable. When you've defined it once, then all the rules go out the window. You can define it wherever you like, and there's no synchronization anymore. Like with override, I could just have I could have a schema, and I could be a rogue developer, and I could add a field, and I could just implement the same field that's in another subgraph, very important field, stick override on it, and I can stick a label on it and then do what I like, and then the router suddenly bends to my will, right? Of what I've put in my label for this. And if I had no label at all, I would take all responsibility for it. And I feel like that is not like how the behavior of the gateway and like look like what is basically load balancing and things. I know like you said you can do other things than just like you could put other stuff which is then interpreted and then it does other things. I don't know like what an example would be, but
Yeah.
in the examples
For
that I've
instance,
seen,
if you're coming from Mexico, then we shift you to this subgraph. Whatever.
yeah, sure. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, I feel like this is not the or in my opinion, should not be the responsibility of the schema. It should be the responsibility of something much closer to the gateway. But I also have opinions about like, for example, the way how Apollo Federation today is that you basically have a supergraph STL and all the machinery for the router is defined in the schema itself, like join, enum and all the rest sort of stuff. And that is not how Wondergraph does it, for example. We have a different way of how we do that. And it's kind of like the same principle. It's like there's certain things I believe live in the schema, and then there are certain things I believe should be like outside the schema. And I think this is one of them, in my opinion. This kind of
Mm.
behavior, or defining how this behavior, because you're defining how should the router act. And I know the whole point of composition is basically instructions of how the router should act, but rather it's more guidelines or instructions for how the router can make its plan. But you're not saying like to the router, under this circumstance, or 75%
Yeah.
of the time you should come over here or something. I feel is
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
I
just a hot
also
take.
that's also what I think. Um, I don't know if policy is wrong. So there could be a policy name there, but having concrete instructions like this, I think, is wrong. Yeah, we have to think about, maybe everybody takes this as homework
And
and
what and
thinks about how we.
another thing I don't like about this is again just coming back to imagine I've got 25% in there, and let's say it's going well, and I want to increase that to 50% or something. That involves me then having to publish another scheme, propose a schema, get it reviewed, get it, pushed, get it published, and then firing it off to all the places. So they've now got the schema. I might have 1,000 router instances, as opposed to just changing, say, a configuration in my gateway that I want to increase the load balancer from 25% to 50%. I feel is a much simpler way and more intuitive way to handle
Yeah.
directing traffic.
Yeah.
Especially if you think about it, how are people going to set this label?
Yeah, it's also like
Like
validation of this label.
you're gonna set this label on your subgraph, and how do you usually get your subgraph schema change to production is by doing a deployment. So now you deploy something with 25% and you say it's nice.
And no, what is in the
then
negative case, Pascal?
one second. You say it's nice, and then you deploy a new version with a new hash and a new Docker version to production, even though that you just said the version before was nice. It doesn't make any sense. Like you know that commit 55 is good, and then you say fair enough, we now do deploy 57. It doesn't make sense.
No, it's also like what do? You deploy this thing. Deployments are slower in this case, right? You have to go through the whole machinery. Then you see, okay, 25%, shit, it's broken. Like then you have to go through the whole
Yeah, you have to
machinery.
redeploy again.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like, configuring a load balancer.
Exactly.
And like let's say it was 1% and then every 1% of that traffic was broken because it just didn't work for whatever reason, like it was completely broken. You can't just like go into your configuration and say, okay, stop sending traffic there. You have to like sit through the CI to,
and then wait, and then shit, composition error because another team did know something, and that I don't know.
And we've got 10,000 routers. I'm sorry, it's going to be an hour until all of them have the.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't make sense. But let's get a plan for.
It's great for dev though. It's great for dev work. Like locally stuff. Like it's absolutely fantastic, right? But when you've got actual hoops in a corporation to jump through, and time and deployment costs and deployment time, I don't know. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah.
It would be helpful if the Apollo guys could elaborate on the intention, right?
Yeah. I will ping Sachin. Maybe that he comes next time. He has a lot of knowledge about these things. Anyway, it was great to talk to you guys. See you in 2 weeks or earlier.
It's the early one, right? Again.
Yeah, it's the early one. The one that Kamil also can come to.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
You too.